wasn't that fantastic. But I think he was a little kind to state parliamentarians. In describing them, Andrew, as a dog's breakfast, good God, man, the dog would be starving. No, that was really wonderful. Now, Andrew has agreed to answer questions after he has a drink of water. Who's got the first one? There we go.
Andrew, I didn't realise I'd eaten you alive last time about local government, but is not the question not should we rearrange the lines on the maps and get rid of a few employees and make a few so-called efficiencies? Shouldn't we rather have the conversation, what is it that local government might do best and what is it that state government might do best, and then divvy the roles and the funding up that way to better serve our communities and make it more participatory for our democracy?
Yes, and I agree, and you taught me a lesson that night. And hence I was very careful to say, very careful to look for you in the audience, and I was very careful to be more open-minded tonight. I don't know what the answers are with our excessive number of councils and their poor standard of service in some areas. I don't know what the answer is. I know what the problem is. I know what the problem is, and surely we've got the wherewithal in Tasmania to come up with some innovative solutions. And I agree. It's not just about cutting jobs.
Yes, there we are.
But neither of the parties in Tasmania have got any sort of progressive policy on that. They're both against forced amalgamations, and I don't know how they're going to have that broken down. I don't think there's enough force within the community to have it broken down.
Look, I don't know the answer to this. I'm floundering on this particular subject because I don't know the answer. We know what the problem is. I think it's self-evident that there is a clear majority of public interest in rationalisation in some way. I think when you have got strong and popular political leaders, you don't need to force a lot of things. They can bring the community along with them, giving the community ownership of the solution. But while you've got such a deeply unpopular government and such a ineffective opposition, there's no one to use that term again, to pick the community up and take them along. In this sort of environment, if you were to significantly reduce the number of councils, you probably would have to do it by force. And I think it would be very, very hurtful on the community. And we've seen the troubles they've had in mainland states where they have forced council amalgamations. They have been terribly unpopular and very hurtful processes. I think about Victoria and the problems they went through and the problems it caused in the community. But I make the point again, if we had popular and effective political leaders, it would be much less likely you would have to do anything by force.
To move on to local government for a second, you mentioned the lack of inspirational figures, particularly in state politics, and I agree with you there. I don't think it's because of a lack of talent or a lack of inspirational people in the community. So where is the Australian version of Yes We Can?
Where is it?
Yeah, where is it? Why aren't those people coming through government?
Again, I don't know the answer to some of these questions, and if people think you can answer the question better than me, please pipe up. Why is it that at the last state election we had the list of candidates that we did? Heaven's sakes, an independent almost got elected. There was that little decent choice in Denison. As we've lost a couple of people from the ALP, we've now got Graham Sturgis back, and the only person they got left in the locker is Madeline Ogilvie on the next recount. Now, that's not a criticism personally of Madeline, in fact, Madeline's a friend, but, was that the best list of candidates we could come up with in Denison, in the capital city electorate at the last state election? Why don't decent people want to have a go? It could be said that, well, we need more respect for politicians. It needs to be regarded as a more honourable occupation. And having now done this for 13 months and worked hard, I do think we get a bit of a bum rap sometimes. Most of the politicians I've come across You know, they're pretty diligent, they're pretty decent people across all political parties, even the ones you don't agree with. Are we paying them enough? Now, there's a controversial statement. Do we need to pay politicians here, where it's pegged to a percentage of the federal wage, it's 80-something%? Do we need to pay more to encourage better politicians? Personally, I don't think so. If you know, for another $10,000 or $20,000, that's not going to solve the problem. We need to put the weights on the parties for them to come up with better candidates. We need to, within the parties we are, or you are involved in, I'm an independent, you know, get better candidates up. Better candidates will be elected.
Sir. Yep.
I quite like the odds of 2-to-1 for local council politicians in Tasmania. Do you see any similarities between one-armed bandits and two-armed politicians?
A similarity between the odds of 2-to-1 to get into council and the odds to win on a poker machine. As we know, the odds to win on a poker machine are much worse than 2-to-1.
While we're on poker machines, what sort of deal breaker is the main vote on the proposition to the federal parliament, and what scenarios do you see breaking out?
Greg, you're being very mischievous in asking me that question, because you know that whenever I get asked that question, and by the way, we have Tony Walker in the front row from the Financial Review here tonight, who's been following me around today, and I will say exactly to you what I said to Tony at lunch. I am very confident, and I really mean this, I am very confident that poker machine reforms will be realised. Not just... not because it's an agreement between the Prime Minister and myself. It's because there is overwhelming public support. The Prime Minister and Jenny Macklin, who's the relevant minister, both genuinely have their heart in it. Because it will be politically, not in all seats, very hard in some seats obviously for the Labor Party, but in many seats it could be politically very helpful for the parties, because they're very popular reforms. And I think there's been a small shift in the public mood over the last few weeks, with the clubs industry on the mainland has kicked own goal after own goal after own goal. They've been caught out, Clubs Australia have been caught out misrepresenting the Salvation Army, they've been caught out misrepresenting the AFL. The mischief going on with the Channel 9 NRL finals broadcast has now been exposed, and ACMA has launched their own investigation. Andrew Demetrio telling that bloke to quote "shut up" unquote. You probably know what I'm talking about. I think the mood has changed, and I think now I know now I'm more confident than ever that it will be realised. Of course, at the end of an answer like that, a journalist says to me, "Yeah, but what if it's not?" And after spending 10 minutes telling you how it's going to be achieved, that one sentence then becomes tomorrow's story. Wilkie threatens government again. But the thing is, when you see that story in the paper, that's not actually the situation between the government and me. We have a good cooperative working relationship now, talking through it step by step. So it's virtually inconceivable that it won't be realised. So I'm not actually going to tease out those possible scenarios if they're not realised. I just don't think it's going to happen anymore. Sorry, I do think the reforms are going to happen. I don't think failure is an option now. And by the way, sorry, I'm on a roll here. Some of you might have seen Rob Oakeshott on Late Line last night. He gave his strongest indication of support yet. He said, so long as the reforms are consistent with the Productivity Commission's recommendations, then he'd be happy to support them. He went quite clearly a step beyond where he's gone previously. I've had a number of Labor backbenchers now corner me in Canberra just in the last week and say things like, look, you know, we were really doing it hard over this issue, and they didn't say, you know, I was cursing you, but I'm now had a gutful of the behaviour of the industry and the way they're behaving and the way they are you know, campaigning against me and campaigning politically. The industry has grossly misplayed this, and when I win, they'll have only themselves to blame. No, I wouldn't reassess my support because I have an agreement signed, agreed to in good faith with Julia Gillard, and I will continue to honour that just as she's honouring her agreement with me. I can't speak for my crossbench colleagues, but I think they'd be of a similar mind. But it would be a very significant game changer if there was some move against Julia Gillard and Malcolm Turnbull was the opposition leader. That would, I think, be a significant development for all crossbenchers, myself included. Because I would be, if Julia Gillard is removed, I would be worried, particularly if it was like what happened to Kevin Rudd. We don't do it that way in Australia. I was appalled it happened the first time, and I'd be even more appalled if it happens a second time. Plus the instability evident in another forced removal. I would be getting to the point where I'd be hard pressed to support her successor.
And Abbott's role, that puts you in a very different situation.
Yeah, and I can't. We start to get into a level of detail where I can't answer because there are so many variables. You know, is Julia Gillard forcibly removed, or does she step down of her own free will? Who replaces her? Who is the opposition leader at the time? What is the outcome of the negotiations that would be sure to follow with both new leaders or the two leaders at the time? There are 101 variables in there, and even, I will say somewhat controversially, even in a Labor-leaning seat like this, there are scenarios where I might not support the Labor Party. You know, I got away with that. Very quiet. No, I think I'm sure you know what I'm not trying to send some sort of coded message there. You know what I'm getting? You know, there are just so many variables. You don't know what all the variables are, so you can't drill down into the answers very far.
Andrew, I think your comments about the lack of leaders is an interesting one, because I think that sometimes, you know, if you look through history, you can point out just a few examples of great leaders, and so the fact that we don't necessarily have a number of leaders or personalities that necessarily come to mind immediately, you know, it might take a little time for people to get there. And I think quite often leadership is shaped, and leaders are shaped by their times. So, you know, it sometimes comes to be that may occur. Just a comment on amalgamations. I think leading up to this local government election, there has been a drive by the Property Council to discuss amalgamations, and it's on the agenda. And whilst it's not necessarily the right reasons for it to be on the agenda, I think it's what it has done is put a spotlight on the council elections, which may not necessarily be there. So I'm just interested in your thoughts on how there might be improvements in governance at the local government level if there was a change in the structure. So
If there were less councils?
If there were fewer councils.
If there were fewer, well,